I still remember the exact moment my world split into two realities, the moment when nothing made sense anymore, when the voice of my own son turned my heartbeat into something heavy and unfamiliar. It was a quiet evening in our small house in Ohio, the kind of evening that usually felt safe, predictable, and warm. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a soft orange glow that filtered through the curtains, touching the edges of the photographs on the wall, pictures of a life that once felt whole. My name is Margaret Collins, and for the past 7 years I have lived as a widow. My husband, Daniel Collins, was taken from me in a car accident on a rainy night that never quite left my memory. Since then, my life had revolved around one person, my son, Ethan. He was not just my child. He became my reason to keep going, my anchor in a world that often felt too quiet and too empty. Ethan had always dreamed of flying. Even as a little boy, he would run around the backyard with his arms stretched wide, pretending to be an airplane, laughing as if the sky itself belonged to him. Daniel used to watch him and say, "One day, he's going to leave us behind and touch the clouds." I used to laugh back then. I didn't know how true those words would become. Years passed, and Ethan did exactly what he had promised himself. He became a pilot. The first time he wore his uniform, standing tall with that quiet confidence in his eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, pride mixed with a bittersweet ache. He was no longer the little boy who needed me for everything. He had grown into a man who carried people across skis I could only look up to. That evening, I was alone at home, as usual. The house had grown quieter over the years, but I had learned to live with the silence. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. My fingers paused on a picture of Daniel and Ethan, father and son, smiling at the camera, frozen in a moment that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. And then I heard it. The front door. It wasn't loud, not a forced entry or anything alarming, just the soft, familiar click of the lock turning, followed by the slow creak of the door opening. My heart skipped a beat, but not out of fear. For a moment, I felt something close to relief. "Ethan," I called out instinctively. There was no answer. I stood up, placing the photo album aside, and walked toward the hallway. The house felt different. I can't explain it properly, but there was a heaviness in the air, like something unseen had quietly slipped inside with that opening door. "Ethan," I called again, a little louder this time. And then I saw her. She was standing near the entrance, just inside the doorway, as if she had been there the entire time, waiting. A young woman, probably in her late 20s, with long dark hair falling over her shoulders. Her clothes were simple, almost too simple, like something you wouldn't notice in a crowd. But it wasn't her appearance that made my chest tighten, it was her stillness. She didn't move, she didn't speak. She just looked at me. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. For a moment, she didn't respond. Her eyes didn't leave mine, and there was something about them that felt wrong. Not dangerous, not angry, just empty in a way that made it hard to breathe. "You shouldn't be here," I added, my voice softer now, unsure of what I was even feeling. Finally, she spoke. "I'm home," she said quietly. The words didn't make sense. Not at first. I frowned slightly, taking a step closer. "This is my house," I said, trying to remain polite, though a strange unease was beginning to crawl under my skin. "I think you might have the wrong place." But she didn't react the way a confused stranger would. She didn't apologize or look around in embarrassment. She simply tilted her head slightly, as if she was studying me. "No," she said again, her voice just above a whisper. "I'm home." I felt a chill run down my spine. Before I could respond, my phone rang. The sudden sound made me jump, breaking the tension that had settled between us. I quickly reached into my pocket and pulled it out. When I saw Ethan's name on the screen, a wave of relief washed over me. "Ethan," I answered immediately, turning slightly away from the woman but not taking my eyes off her. "Are you coming home? There's—" "Mom," his voice cut in, sharp and urgent, unlike anything I had heard before. "Listen to me carefully." My heart started to race. "What's wrong?" I asked. There was a brief silence on the line, followed by the sound of something in the background, voices, maybe announcements. He was working. He was on a flight. "Mom," he said again, his voice lower now, controlled but tense. "I need you to tell me something. Is anyone there with you right now?" I glanced back at the woman. She hadn't moved. She was still standing exactly where she had been, her eyes fixed on me. "Yes," I said slowly. "There's a woman here. I don't know who she is. She just walked in and—" "That's impossible." His words came out so quickly, so firmly, that it felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "I mean that's not possible," he repeated. "Mom, she's on my flight." I froze. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. My mind struggled to process the sentence, to find some logical explanation that would make everything fall back into place. "What are you talking about?" I said, my voice trembling now. "Ethan, there's a woman standing in my house right now." "Describe her," he interrupted. I swallowed hard, my eyes still locked on the stranger. She's young, dark hair. She's wearing a light-colored dress. She's just standing here, Ethan. She says this is her home." There was a long pause on the line. And then I heard something in his breathing that I had never heard before. Fear. "Mom," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's a passenger on my flight, same description, same face. She boarded 2 hours ago. She hasn't moved from her seat. She hasn't spoken to anyone." My hand began to shake. I looked at the woman again, my vision slightly blurred now, my thoughts spinning out of control. "That's not possible," I said, echoing his earlier words, but they sounded hollow coming from me. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm calling." The room felt colder. The silence between us grew heavier, filled with something neither of us could explain. "Mom," he said again, more urgently this time. "Listen to me. Don't let her out of your sight. I'm going to figure this out. Just stay on the phone with me." But I could barely hear him anymore. Because the woman had started walking toward me. Slowly. Deliberately. And as she moved closer, her lips began to curl into something that looked almost like a smile, but there was no warmth in it. No humanity. Just a quiet, unsettling certainty. "I told you," she whispered, her voice echoing in the stillness of the house. "I'm home." And in that moment, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The woman standing in front of me was not a stranger. She was someone my son had already seen. Someone who was supposed to be miles above the ground. On his flight. And yet, she was here. Inside my house. Watching me. The moment her lips curved into that faint, unnatural smile, something inside me broke, not loudly, not suddenly, but like a quiet thread snapping deep within my chest. I could still hear Ethan's voice through the phone pressed against my ear, distant now, muffled by the overwhelming weight of what stood in front of me. My fingers tightened around the device, as if it were the only real thing left anchoring me to reality. The woman continued walking toward me, her steps slow and measured, each one echoing softly against the wooden floor, each one sending a ripple of fear through my body that I could no longer control. I tried to speak, to say something to Ethan, to ask him what I should do, but my voice refused to come out. My throat felt dry, locked, as if even my own body was beginning to betray me. "Mom! Mom, are you still there?" Ethan's voice broke through again, sharper this time, filled with urgency that only made everything worse. I forced myself to swallow, to breathe, to respond. She's walking toward me," I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. The woman stopped just a few feet away from me now, close enough for me to see the details of her face, the smoothness of her skin, the stillness of her expression, and those eyes. Those empty, unreadable eyes that held no reflection of fear, no confusion, nothing human that I could grasp onto. She tilted her head slightly again, as if listening, as if she could hear Ethan too, even though the phone was pressed to my ear. "Don't let her touch you," Ethan said quickly, his tone shifting into something commanding, something protective, the way his father used to sound when he sensed danger. "Mom, listen to me, you need to get out of the house, right now." I wanted to move. God, I wanted to run. but my feet felt rooted to the ground, as if the space around me had thickened into something I could not push through. The woman's gaze never left mine, and there was something deeply wrong about the way she was looking at me, not like a stranger, not even like an intruder, but like someone who knew me, who had always known me. "Why are you afraid?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a strange calmness that didn't belong in this moment. "This is my home, too." My heart pounded harder. "No," I managed to say, shaking my head weakly. "No, it's not. You need to leave." She didn't react with anger or frustration. Instead, her expression softened in a way that felt even more disturbing, like she pitied me. "You've been alone for so long," she said, almost gently. "It must be difficult holding on to a life that's already gone." A sharp pain shot through my chest at her words, not physical, but something deeper, something that touched wounds I had spent years trying to bury. "Mom," Ethan's voice came again, louder now, more frantic. "You need to get out, do you hear me? I don't care what she says, just leave." I took a step back, finally breaking the invisible hold that had kept me frozen. The movement felt small, but it was enough to remind me that I still had control over my body. I turned slightly toward the hallway, thinking of the back door, thinking of escape, of distance, of anything that could put space between me and whatever this woman was. But the moment I shifted my gaze away from her, I felt it, that sudden, unbearable awareness that she had moved again, faster this time. When I looked back, she was closer, too close, my breath caught in my throat. "You shouldn't turn your back on me," she said quietly. "That's not safe." Panic surged through me now, raw and uncontrollable. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the phone. "Ethan, she's right here," I gasped. "I can't. Go to the neighbor's house," he interrupted. "Mrs. Carter, just run there, Mom. I'm calling the police right now." The word police echoed in my mind, but it didn't bring comfort. Somehow, this didn't feel like something they could handle, like something that could be explained with reports and flashing lights. This felt wrong in a way that didn't belong to the normal world. Still, I clung to his instructions because he was my son, because he was the only voice I trusted in that moment. I took another step back, then another, my eyes locked on the woman as I slowly moved toward the door. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't reach out or block my path. She simply watched, that same faint smile lingering on her lips. "You can leave if you want," she said softly, "but you'll come back." I shook my head, tears beginning to blur my vision. "No," I whispered. "No, I won't." But even as I said it, something inside me felt uncertain, like her words had settled somewhere deep, planting doubt where I needed certainty the most. I reached the door, my hand fumbling with the handle, my fingers trembling so badly it took me 2 tries to open it. The cool evening air hit my face the moment it swung open, and I didn't hesitate anymore. I stepped outside quickly, then turned back just long enough to look at her one last time. She was still standing there in the same spot, perfectly still, as if she had never moved at all. But her eyes followed me, always watching, always aware. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind me, though I wasn't sure why. A simple wooden door suddenly felt meaningless against something like her. "Mom, did you get out?" Ethan's voice came again, urgent and strained. "Yes," I said quickly, my voice shaking as I hurried down the steps. "I'm outside. I'm going to Mrs. Carter's house." "Good," he said, exhaling sharply. "Stay there. Don't go back inside until I tell you. The police should be on their way." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me, and started walking quickly down the path toward my neighbor's house. Each step felt unsteady, like the ground itself wasn't entirely real anymore. My mind kept replaying everything, the way she had spoken, the way she had looked at me, the way Ethan had said she was on his flight at the exact same time. It didn't make sense. None of it did. And yet it was happening. As I reached the edge of my yard, I couldn't stop myself. I turned back. The house stood there, quiet and unchanged, just as it always had. But one of the windows, the living room window, caught my attention. And there she was, standing behind the glass, watching me leave. The same faint smile on her lips. And as I stared, frozen once again in place. She slowly raised her hand and waved. I don't remember crossing the distance between my house and Mrs. Carter's front door. One moment I was standing at the edge of my yard, staring at that impossible figure behind my window, and the next, I was pounding on my neighbor's door with a desperation I had never felt before. My hands trembled so violently that I could barely form a steady rhythm, each knock uneven, frantic, echoing into the quiet night like a cry for help I could no longer contain. "Mom, stay with me," Ethan's voice insisted through the phone, grounding me just enough to keep from collapsing completely. "Are you at the neighbor's house?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to focus. I'm at the door, I said, my voice breaking. She's not answering yet. Behind me, the street felt too quiet, too still, as if the world itself had paused to watch what would happen next. I didn't dare turn around again. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing her any closer than she already was in my mind. Finally, the door creaked open, and Mrs. Carter appeared, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to immediate concern the moment she saw my face. "Margaret, oh my goodness, what happened?" she asked, stepping aside quickly. I didn't wait for an invitation. I stepped inside, almost stumbling as I crossed the threshold, my breath uneven, my heart still racing as if I had been running for miles. "There's someone in my house," I managed to say, gripping the edge of her hallway table for support. "She just walked in and she won't leave, and Ethan says—" I stopped myself, realizing how insane it sounded even as I spoke it. Mrs. Carter gently closed the door behind me, her brow furrowed with worry. "Slow down," she said softly. "Sit down, dear, you're shaking." But I couldn't sit, not yet. Sitting felt like surrendering to something I didn't understand. I held the phone tighter instead, as if Ethan's presence on the other end was the only thing keeping me from unraveling completely. "Mom, are you safe?" he asked again. "I'm inside," I replied quickly. "At Mrs. Carter. She's here with me." "Good," he said, though I could still hear the tension in his voice. "Stay there, the police should be close." Mrs. Carter looked at me carefully, her expression softening but still filled with concern. "Do you want me to call someone?" she asked. I shook my head slightly, lifting the phone. "My son already has," I said. She nodded, though I could tell she didn't fully understand. How could she? I barely understood it myself. I finally allowed myself to sit on the edge of her couch, my body feeling weak now that the immediate danger was no longer right in front of me. But the image of that woman, her face, her voice, her eyes, refused to leave my mind. "Mom," Ethan said after a brief pause, his voice quieter now, more controlled. "I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Okay," I whispered. "The woman on my flight, she hasn't moved since boarding," he said. "I've had one of the flight attendants keep an eye on her. She's sitting in seat 14A. She hasn't eaten, hasn't spoken, nothing, just staring." A cold wave washed over me. "Staring at what?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. There was a slight hesitation before he replied. "At nothing," he said. "Or at least that's what it looks like. But every time someone walks past her, they say it feels like she's watching them, even though her eyes don't follow." I closed my eyes briefly, trying to steady my breathing. "Ethan, she spoke to me," I said softly. "She said this was her home." There was silence on the line again, heavier this time. "It doesn't make sense," he said finally, though his voice lacked the certainty it had before. "I know," I replied. "Nothing about this makes sense." Mrs. Carter sat down beside me, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "Margaret, who is he talking about?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, unsure how to explain something that sounded impossible even to my own ears. "A woman," I said slowly. "She's in my house, but my son says she's also on his plane." Mrs. Carter blinked, clearly confused. "That's not possible," she said, her voice careful, as if she didn't want to upset me further. "I know," I whispered again, the words feeling heavier each time I said them. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. This time it was firm and steady, official. Both of us flinched slightly at the sound. "That must be the police," Mrs. Carter said, standing up quickly. Relief and fear collided inside me at the same time. I wasn't sure which one would win. She opened the door and 2 officers stepped inside, their presence bringing a sense of structure to the chaos, even if it was only temporary. "We received a call about a possible intruder," one of them said, his tone calm but alert. Mrs. Carter gestured toward me. "It's her house," she explained. "She said someone broke in." The officers turned their attention to me. "Ma'am, can you tell us exactly what happened?" one of them asked. I stood up slowly, my legs still unsteady. I glanced down at the phone for a moment, then back at them. "There's a woman in my house," I said. "She just walked in like she belonged there. She wouldn't leave." "Did she threaten you in any way?" the officer asked. I hesitated. "No, not exactly," I admitted, "but something isn't right." They exchanged a brief glance, the kind that said more than words ever could. "We'll go check it out," the other officer said. "Would you like to come with us?" My immediate instinct was to say no, to stay as far away from that house as possible. But something pulled at me, something I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the need for answers. Maybe it was the fear of leaving something unfinished behind. "I'll go," I said quietly. Mrs. Carter looked at me with concern. "Are you sure?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure at all. "I need to see," I said. I kept the phone in my hand as I stepped back outside with the officers, my heart beginning to race again as my house came back into view. It looked the same as always, calm, silent, almost innocent. But I knew better now. As we approached the front door, one of the officers reached for the handle and pushed it open. The door swung inward slowly, revealing the dimly lit interior. Everything looked normal, too normal. "Ma'am, stay behind us," one of them instructed as they stepped inside. I followed cautiously, my eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, searching for any sign of her. The living room was empty. The hallway was quiet. There was no movement, no sound, nothing to suggest that anyone else had been there at all. "Clear," one of the officers called out after checking the other rooms. My chest tightened. "That's not possible," I said under my breath. She was here. I stepped further inside, my gaze drifting toward the living room window. The same window where I had seen her just minutes ago was empty now, just a reflection of the room behind me. The officers turned back to me, their expressions calm but slightly skeptical. "Ma'am, there's no one here," one of them said gently. I shook my head, my heart sinking. "No, she was here. I saw her. She spoke to me." Before they could respond, my phone crackled softly in my hand. "Mom," Ethan's voice came through again, tense and hurried. "You need to listen to me very carefully." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "What is it?" I asked. There was a pause just long enough to make my pulse spike, and then he said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "The woman in seat 14A, he said slowly. "She's gone." My breath caught. "What do you mean, gone?" I whispered. "I mean she was there a minute ago," he replied, "and now her seat is empty." The room around me seemed to spin slightly, reality slipping further and further away with every passing second. I looked around the house again, at the empty spaces, the quiet walls, the absence of something that had felt so real just moments before. And then, from somewhere deep inside the house, I heard it. A soft sound, footsteps, coming from upstairs. The sound of footsteps from upstairs did not echo loudly, yet it carried through the house with a clarity that froze every muscle in my body. It was slow, deliberate, each step measured, as if whoever was walking knew exactly where they were going and had no reason to hurry. The two officers paused instantly, their attention snapping toward the staircase. The calm confidence they had shown just moments earlier shifted into something more alert, more cautious. One of them raised his hand slightly, signaling for silence, while the other instinctively moved a step forward, his posture tightening as he listened carefully. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than anything else, thudding against my chest in uneven, desperate rhythms. My fingers gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned pale. "Mom," Ethan's voice came through again, faint but urgent. "What's happening? Are you still there?" I couldn't answer him. Not yet. My eyes were locked on the staircase, on the darkened upper hallway that now seemed impossibly far away and dangerously close at the same time. The officer nearest to the stairs turned slightly toward me. "Ma'am, you said no one else was in the house," he asked in a low voice. I shook my head slowly, my lips trembling. She was here," I whispered. "And now—" I couldn't finish the sentence because the implication was too real, too terrifying to say out loud. The second officer drew a slow breath, then gestured toward his partner. "We'll check it," he said quietly. "Stay here." They began moving toward the stairs, each step careful, controlled, their presence suddenly feeling very human, very fragile compared to whatever it was that waited above. I wanted to stop them. I wanted to tell them not to go, that this wasn't something they could handle, that this wasn't normal. But the words refused to come. Instead, I stood there, rooted once again in place, forced to listen as they climbed the stairs one by one. The sound of their boots against the wooden steps mixed with the faint, lingering echo of those other footsteps, the ones that had started this moment. When they reached the top, everything went quiet. Too quiet. "Clear the hallway," one of them called out softly, though his voice lacked the certainty it had before. A door creaked open. Then another. The soft sounds of them checking each room filtered down to where I stood, every noise stretching the tension tighter and tighter inside me. I realized then that I was holding my breath. Slowly, carefully, I exhaled, my chest tightening as I did. "Mom, talk to me," Ethan insisted, his voice sharper now. "What's going on?" "They're upstairs," I whispered finally. "They heard something, footsteps." There was a brief silence on the line, followed by the faint sound of movement on his end, voices, urgency, something shifting rapidly. "That's not possible," he said again, but this time the words sounded hollow, like he didn't believe them anymore. She was here, I repeated weakly. And now you're saying she's gone from the plane, Ethan. I don't understand. Neither of us did, and somehow that was the worst part. Suddenly there was a loud noise from upstairs, a door slamming shut with enough force to make me jump. I gasped, my entire body jolting as the sound echoed through the house. What was that? Ethan asked quickly. Before I could answer, one of the officers shouted, "Sir, over here." The urgency in his voice sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I took a step forward without thinking, my instincts pulling me toward the stairs despite every part of me screaming to stay away. "Ma'am, stay back," the other officer called down sharply. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I moved closer to the base of the stairs, my hand gripping the railing as if it could steady the storm inside me. "What is it?" I called out, my voice shaking. There was no immediate answer, just a heavy, suffocating silence that seemed to press down from above. And then, "You need to come up here," one of them said finally, his tone no longer calm, no longer controlled. Something had changed. My heart sank. I hesitated for only a second before starting up the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The air grew colder as I climbed, the familiar warmth of my home replaced by something distant and unwelcoming. When I reached the top, I saw them standing at the end of the hallway, just outside my bedroom. Both officers were frozen in place, staring into the room as if they had seen something they couldn't explain. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely audible. They didn't answer right away. Slowly, one of them stepped aside, giving me a clear view inside, and the moment I looked, the world seemed to stop. My bedroom looked exactly as I had left it that morning. The bed neatly made, the curtains slightly drawn, the soft lamp light casting familiar shadows along the walls. But that wasn't what held my attention. It was the mirror. The large mirror across from the bed, because someone was standing in it. My breath caught in my throat. She was there. The same woman, the same face, the same empty eyes, but she wasn't standing in the room. She was only visible in the reflection. I instinctively turned my head, looking directly into the room itself. There was nothing there, no one, just empty space. My pulse raced as I slowly looked back at the mirror, and there she was again. Watching me, standing still as if she had always been part of that reflection. "Do you see her?" I whispered, my voice trembling. One of the officers nodded slowly, his face pale. "Yes," he said under his breath, "but there's no one actually in the room." My hands began to shake uncontrollably now. "Ethan," I said into the phone, my voice breaking completely. "She's here, but she's not here." "What do you mean?" he asked urgently. I swallowed hard, my eyes locked on the reflection. "She's in the mirror," I whispered. There was silence on the line, deep, heavy silence. And then Ethan spoke again, his voice lower than before, filled with something I had never heard from him until now, fear that matched my own. "Mom," he said slowly, "the passengers are starting to panic." My chest tightened. "Why?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. He hesitated for just a moment. "Because," he said quietly, "people are saying they're seeing her too." The room seemed to tilt slightly, reality bending in a way that no longer followed any rules I understood. I stared at the mirror, at the woman who stood there without truly being there, at the faint smile that still lingered on her lips. And then she moved. Not in the room, not in front of us, only in the reflection. She slowly raised her hand again, and this time she didn't wave. She pointed. Directly at me. Her finger, pale and steady, remained pointed directly at me through the mirror, as if the distance between reflection and reality no longer mattered. My breath became shallow, uneven, and for a moment I couldn't tell if I was standing still or slowly collapsing inside myself. The officers didn't move either. We were all caught in that single, impossible moment, 3 living people staring at something that should not exist. "Mom, say something," Ethan's voice pleaded through the phone, but it sounded far away now, like it was coming from another world entirely. I couldn't answer him. My eyes were locked on her reflection, on the way her lips slowly parted as if she was about to speak again. But no sound came from the mirror. Instead, I felt it right behind me. A presence. Warm, close, real. My entire body stiffened as a faint whisper brushed against my ear, so soft it barely disturbed the air. "You came back." I gasped and spun around instantly, my heart slamming violently against my chest. But there was no one behind me. The hallway was empty, just as it had been before. The officers reacted at the same time, one of them stepping forward quickly. "Ma'am, what happened?" he asked, his voice tense. I shook my head, backing away slightly. She was right here," I said, my voice trembling uncontrollably. "She spoke to me." "There's no one there," he insisted, though his own eyes betrayed uncertainty. I turned back toward the mirror, almost afraid of what I would see now. And she was still there, still watching, but her expression had changed. The faint smile was gone, replaced by something deeper, something heavier, something that looked almost like sadness, or perhaps disappointment. Slowly, she lowered her hand, her gaze never leaving mine. And then, without warning, the surface of the mirror rippled. It was subtle at first, like a disturbance in water, but it spread outward, distorting her image just enough to make my stomach twist. "Do you see that?" one of the officers whispered. "The glass!" The ripple grew stronger for a brief second, and then it stopped. Everything returned to normal. The mirror looked like any other mirror again. Empty, she was gone, completely gone. I blinked rapidly, my mind struggling to catch up. "Where did she go?" I whispered. No one answered. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything before it, pressing against my chest until it became hard to breathe. "Mom," Ethan's voice broke through again, more urgent now. "Something's wrong here." I clutched the phone tighter. "What is it?" I asked quickly. I heard voices in the background, raised, confused, frightened. It was no longer controlled. Whatever was happening on that plane had changed. "Passengers are saying they're hearing things," he said. "Whispers calling their names." A chill ran down my spine. "Ethan." Began, but I didn't know what I was going to say. What could I say? "And Mom," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "one of the flight attendants just told me something." I held my breath. "What?" There was a pause, just long enough to make my heart pound harder. "She said the woman in 14A wasn't on the passenger list." The words hit me like a physical force. "That's not possible," I said weakly, even though I had already said those words too many times tonight. "I know," he replied. "But it gets worse." My fingers tightened around the phone again. "What do you mean?" Another pause. I could hear him breathing, uneven, controlled, but strained. "The seat she was sitting in," he said slowly. "It was empty before boarding." My legs felt weak beneath me. I reached out instinctively, gripping the edge of the wall for support. The room around me felt unstable, like it might shift at any moment. "Mom, I need you to listen carefully," Ethan said. "Whatever that thing is, it's not just in one place." I closed my eyes for a brief second, trying to steady myself. But the image of her in the mirror, the feeling of her presence behind me, the sound of her voice, it all remained vivid and undeniable. "I think she's following you," he added quietly, my breath caught. "No," I whispered. "No, she stayed here. I saw her." "Did you?" he interrupted gently. "Or did she just want you to think that?" The question settled into my mind like a weight I couldn't lift. Before I could respond, one of the officers stepped closer. "Ma'am, we need to leave this room," he said firmly. "Right now." I looked at him, confused. "Why?" He hesitated for just a second before answering. "Because the mirror wasn't the only thing." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" The second officer gestured slowly toward the far side of the room, toward the wall just beside the closet. I turned my head carefully, my heart already racing again, bracing for whatever I was about to see. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It looked like shadows, uneven, distorted shapes stretching across the wall. But then I realized they weren't shadows. They were handprints, dozens of them, pressed against the wall as if someone had been trying to push their way through from the other side. My breath left me in a sharp, broken gasp. The prints varied in size, some small, some larger, but all of them shared one detail that made my blood run cold. They were facing outward, as if something had been trapped inside, trying to get out. "This wasn't here before," I whispered, shaking my head slowly. "This can't be real." The officers exchanged another glance, their earlier confidence completely gone now. "We're leaving," one of them said again, more firmly this time. "All of us." I nodded quickly, unable to argue. I didn't want to stay there another second. We moved back into the hallway, the air feeling slightly easier to breathe the moment we stepped away from that room. But the unease didn't leave. It lingered, clinging to me like something unseen. As we started toward the stairs, I couldn't help myself. I looked back one last time. The bedroom door was still open, the light still on, the room appearing calm and unchanged from a distance. But I knew better now. I knew what was inside. And as I turned away, I heard it again. Faint, almost impossible to catch, a whisper. "Don't go." I froze for just a second, my heart skipping painfully. But this time I didn't turn back. I couldn't. "Mom, are you moving?" Ethan asked urgently. "Yes," I said quickly, forcing myself forward. "We're leaving." But even as I said it, a terrifying thought began to take shape in my mind, one that I couldn't ignore no matter how much I wanted to. What if leaving didn't matter? What if, wherever I went, she would already be there? We moved down the stairs in silence, but it wasn't the normal kind of silence. It was heavy, suffocating, as if the air itself was listening to us. Every step the officers took sounded sharper now, more alert, like even they no longer trusted what they had seen upstairs. I followed closely behind them, my hand still shaking as I held the phone against my ear, Ethan's breathing faint but steady on the other end. "Mom, don't hang up," he said quickly. "Just keep talking to me." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I'm here," I whispered. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, I instinctively looked back up once more, expecting no, fearing to see something watching from the top landing. But there was nothing. Just darkness stretching across the hallway, yet the emptiness felt wrong, as if it was waiting rather than being empty. One of the officers reached the front door first, hand already on the handle. "We're getting her out of here," he muttered under his breath. The other officer stayed slightly behind, glancing around the living room with tense caution. I should have felt relief. I should have felt safe, but I didn't. Because safety is supposed to feel like an ending, and this felt like something was still continuing. As we stepped outside, the night air hit my face again, cold and sharp, but this time it didn't comfort me. It felt unfamiliar, like I had stepped out of my own world and into something slightly different. I turned back instinctively, and for a moment I expected to see the woman standing in the doorway again. But the house stood still. Quiet. Normal. Too normal. "Mom," Ethan's voice tightened. "Are you outside now?" "Yes," I said quickly, stepping away from the house. "We're out." There was a pause, a long, uncertain pause. Then he spoke again, slower this time. "The flight attendant just told me something else." I frowned. "What?" My feet kept moving down the driveway as I spoke, as if staying still was no longer an option. "She said passengers are seeing reflections where there are no mirrors," he said. I stopped walking. "That doesn't make sense," I whispered. "I know," he replied, and his voice sounded strained now, like he was trying to stay calm for both of us. "But people are looking at windows, trays, even black screens, and seeing her face." My grip tightened on the phone. I looked at the officers, who were now speaking quietly to each other near the porch, but I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. My focus was slipping, narrowing, like the world was closing in around the words I was hearing. "Ethan," I said slowly. "She was in my mirror. Then she disappeared." "And now she's appearing on the plane," he said, "at the same time." A chill spread through my chest. I turned my head slightly toward the house again, unable to stop myself. The windows reflected the streetlights faintly, nothing unusual, nothing alive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching from behind them. "We're taking you somewhere safe," one of the officers said as he approached me. "Do you have family nearby?" I shook my head slightly. "Just my son," I said, lifting the phone. "He's in the air." The officer looked confused. "He's flying right now." "He's a pilot," I clarified weakly. "He called me from his flight." The two officers exchanged another glance, and I could see it clearly now, the doubt creeping into their expressions. Not disbelief exactly, but uncertainty. The kind that grows when something doesn't fit into anything they've been trained to understand. "Ma'am," one of them said gently, "are you sure about what you saw?" I froze slightly. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did. "Yes," I said quietly, "I'm sure." Ethan's voice came back through the phone again, more urgent now. "Mom, listen to me carefully. One of the passengers just stood up." My heart skipped. "Why?" I asked quickly. "Because she's walking down the aisle," he said, "toward the cockpit." A sudden wave of panic rushed through me. "Ethan, lock the cockpit door," I said instinctively, even though I didn't know if that was even possible in that moment. "Already done," he replied quickly. "But she's not stopping." I turned away from the house completely now, stepping further down the driveway as if distance alone could protect me from whatever was happening. The officers followed, still speaking quietly, but I couldn't focus on them anymore. "She's not acting like a passenger," Ethan continued. "It's like she knows exactly where she's going." My breathing became uneven again. "What does she look like right now?" I asked. There was a pause. "The same," he said slowly, "but not the same at the same time." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "Her face," he said carefully, "it looks different depending on who looks at her." My stomach twisted. "That's impossible," I whispered again, but the words no longer held any meaning. Nothing was impossible anymore, not after everything that had happened. Suddenly, Ethan's voice dropped lower. "Mom," she just stopped. I felt my entire body tense. "Where?" I asked. "In front of the cockpit door," he said. "She's just standing there now." I held my breath. "Is she saying anything?" "No," he replied. "She's just looking at it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the night around me felt heavier, like it was waiting for something to happen. Then Ethan spoke again, and this time his voice cracked slightly. "Mom, she's smiling again." My blood turned cold. Ethan, get away from her, I said urgently. Don't go near her, I'm not near her, he interrupted quickly. I'm still at the cockpit. Then what is she doing? I asked. There was another pause, a longer one this time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. She's not looking at the door anymore. My heart pounded harder. Then what is she looking at? I asked. And then he said the words that made everything inside me go completely still. She's looking at me, he whispered. My legs felt weak. I grabbed the officer beside me instinctively just to stay upright. But you said you're at the cockpit, I said, struggling to understand. I am, he replied, but she's still looking at me. A cold realization crept through me, slowly, unwanted, heavy. Ethan, I said carefully, is she inside the cockpit? There was silence, long, deep, and then Ethan said something that shattered the last sense of normal reality I had left. Mom, he whispered, there's no one outside the cockpit door anymore. My breath stopped completely. What do you mean? I asked, my voice breaking. I mean, he said slowly, she never moved. A pause. She was never walking down the aisle. My mind spun. Then what did you see? I asked, barely able to speak. His voice dropped to almost nothing. I think she was already here. At that exact moment, I looked up at my house again. And in the upstairs window, the same window from before, she was standing there again, watching, smiling, as if she had never left at all. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My eyes stayed locked on that upstairs window, refusing to believe what I was seeing even though every part of me already knew the truth, that she was there again. Standing exactly where she had been before, calm, still, smiling like nothing had ever changed, the officers noticed my reaction immediately. Ma'am, one of them asked, following my gaze up toward the house. What is it now? I tried to speak, but my throat tightened so much that no sound came out at first. My hand shook violently as I lifted it slightly, pointing toward the window. She's back, I whispered finally. Ethan heard me through the phone. What do you mean she's back? He asked quickly, his voice rising with tension again. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep looking. In the upstairs window, I said. She's standing there again. There was a pause on his end, but this one felt different, heavier, almost disbelieving. Mom, he said slowly, that's not possible. I let out a shaky breath. I know what I'm seeing, I replied, my voice breaking slightly. The officer closest to me stepped forward cautiously. We cleared that room, he said firmly. There was no one upstairs, we checked everything. I nodded quickly, almost desperately. She wasn't there when we came out, I said, but she is now. The second officer looked up at the window as well, squinting slightly. For a moment I thought he would see her too, but his expression only shifted into confusion. There's nothing there, he said quietly. My stomach dropped. I looked again, and for a brief second she was gone. The window showed only darkness inside the room, faint reflections of the streetlights, nothing more. I blinked rapidly, my breathing uneven. No, she was there, I whispered. She was just, Ethan cut in sharply. Mom, listen to me, he said. Are you absolutely sure you're seeing the same thing each time? I hesitated. Yes, I said immediately. But even as I said it, doubt began creeping in, not because I didn't trust myself, but because nothing about this situation stayed consistent. Nothing stayed real for more than a moment. I looked back up at the window again. Empty. She's gone now, I said slowly, confusion replacing panic for a second. The officer beside me nodded slightly. Maybe it was a reflection, he suggested. Light can do strange things at night. But I knew better. This wasn't light. This wasn't a trick of the eye. I had seen her too clearly, too many times. Ethan's voice came again, but it was quieter now. Something just happened on the plane, he said. My attention snapped back instantly. What? I asked. The woman, he said slowly. She's no longer in the cabin. My heart sank. Did she disappear again? I asked. No, he replied. She didn't disappear. A pause, a long, heavy one. She's just not inside the plane anymore. I felt a cold shiver run through me. Ethan, that doesn't make sense, I said quickly. Where would she go? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, I heard movement, voices in the background, panic rising again. They're searching the aircraft, he said finally. Every row, every seat, but there's no sign of her. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself, but it didn't help. The image of her face kept returning, her expression, her stillness, the way she seemed to exist and not exist at the same time. Mom, Ethan said again, his voice more controlled now, but tighter than before. Something is connecting this. I opened my eyes. What do you mean? I asked. He hesitated. I don't know how to explain it, he admitted, but every time she appears somewhere, something changes somewhere else. My grip on the phone tightened. Changes how? I asked. Like she's not moving through space, he said slowly, but through something else. I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. But the fear inside me was growing into something sharper now, something more focused. Ethan, I whispered, what are you saying? He didn't answer right away. Instead, I heard him take a slow breath, like he was preparing himself for something he didn't want to say out loud. I think, he said carefully, she's not a person moving between places. A pause. I think she's appearing where people notice her. The words didn't make sense at first, but then they did, and that realization hit me harder than anything else that night. You're saying, I began slowly, my voice shaking, she's only where we see her. Ethan didn't respond immediately. That silence was enough. My eyes drifted back to the house again. The upstairs window was still empty, but now I didn't trust it. I didn't trust anything anymore. That's impossible, I whispered again, but it sounded weaker this time. We saw her physically, I added quickly. She walked, she spoke, she touched the air, she was real. Was she? Ethan asked quietly. The question hit me like ice. Before I could respond, one of the officers spoke again. Ma'am, he said, his tone more serious now, we're going to take you somewhere safe. I don't think staying here is a good idea. I nodded quickly. Yes, I said, anywhere, just not here. We started moving toward the patrol car parked nearby, its lights casting faint shadows across the street. But as I walked, something made me stop. A feeling, that same feeling from before, like I was being watched again. Slowly, I turned back toward the house. The officers paused. Ma'am, one of them asked. I didn't answer immediately because I saw something in the reflection of the car window. At first, it was unclear, just distortion, just darkness. But then it sharpened. And there she was again, standing behind me, not in the house, not in the window, but right there in the reflection of the glass, closer than before. My entire body froze. Ethan, I whispered into the phone, my voice barely audible. She's here again. But when I looked up, nothing was behind me. Only the empty street, only the night. Only silence. And then Ethan said something that made my blood run cold. Mom, he said slowly, I just saw her too. I closed my eyes for a second, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Where? I asked, terrified of the answer. His voice dropped to almost nothing. Inside the cockpit reflection, he whispered. In the glass panel behind me. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't just appearing in places. She wasn't just moving between us. She was becoming part of every reflection we looked into. And somehow, she was learning where we were looking next. I didn't realize I was shaking until one of the officers gently opened the car door and asked me to sit inside. My body moved automatically, but my mind was still trapped in that reflection, still seeing her standing where nothing should have been. The moment I sat down, the interior of the patrol car felt too enclosed, too quiet, as if even the air had been sealed off from the outside world. Ethan's voice was still on the phone, but now it felt like the only thing keeping me connected to reality. Mom, stay with me, he said quickly. Don't look at anything reflective. Just focus on my voice. I nodded even though he couldn't see me, pressing the phone tighter against my ear. I'm here, I whispered. I'm not going anywhere. One of the officers leaned into the car slightly. We're going to take you to the station, he said calmly, though I could hear the tension beneath his controlled tone. You'll be safe there. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the word safe no longer meant anything after everything that had already happened. As the car engine started, I turned my head slightly toward the window and immediately regretted it. The glass was dark, reflective, like a mirror I hadn't asked for. For a split second, I saw nothing. Just my own pale face, exhausted and terrified. But then behind me, she appeared again, standing right there in the reflection, close, too close. I gasped sharply and pulled back, hitting the opposite seat. No, she's here again, I said loudly, panic rising instantly. Officer in the front turned his head slightly. Where? I pointed at the window, my hand trembling uncontrollably. In the glass, I whispered. She's in the glass. He frowned, looking carefully. Ma'am, there's no one outside the vehicle. Not outside, I said quickly. Inside the reflection. Ethan's voice broke in immediately. Mom, don't look at it, he said urgently. Just don't look at it. But it was too late. I had already seen her. And once you see her, it felt impossible to unsee her. The car began moving slowly down the road, headlights cutting through the darkness ahead. But with every passing streetlight, the reflections inside the windows changed, shifted, flickered. And every time I looked, even accidentally, I thought I saw her somewhere else. Sometimes behind the seat, sometimes in the glass of the front panel, sometimes so faint I couldn't tell if it was real or imagined. My breathing became uneven again. Ethan, I whispered. I think she's following the reflections. There was a long pause. I think you're right, he said quietly. That answer terrified me more than anything else. I turned my face away from the window completely, closing my eyes tightly. Don't look, I repeated to myself. Don't look. But even with my eyes closed, I still felt it, that presence, that awareness, like something was watching me from every possible angle at once. Mom, Ethan said after a moment, his voice strained again. Something just changed on the plane. My eyes opened instantly. What? I asked. The lights flickered, he said, just for a second, and every reflective surface in the cabin went dark. I sat up slightly. And then, he continued slowly, everyone saw her at the same time. My heart dropped. Where? I asked quickly. Everywhere, he said. In tray tables, in phone screens, in windows, even in water bottles. A cold silence followed his words. I couldn't respond. I couldn't even process it properly. But Mom, he added, his voice now lower, this time she didn't look at them. I swallowed hard. Then what did she do? Another pause, longer this time. She looked at the cockpit door again, he said, like she's waiting for something. I closed my eyes again, trying to steady myself. Ethan, please tell me you're safe, I whispered. I don't know anymore, he admitted quietly. That was the first time I heard him say something like that. My son, the pilot, the confident voice on the other end of the line, sounded uncertain. Human, afraid. The car continued driving, the road stretching endlessly ahead, but I had no idea where we were going anymore. Everything felt disconnected, like I was moving through something that wasn't fully real. After a few minutes, we arrived at the police station. The building was lit brightly, almost aggressively, like it was trying to force order into the chaos of the night. The officers helped me out of the car, guiding me inside quickly. I didn't resist. I couldn't. The moment I stepped into the station, people turned to look at me. I could feel their curiosity, their concern, but none of it mattered because I still felt her, somewhere, watching. We were taken into a small room with bright white lights and plain walls. No windows, no reflections. At least that's what I thought at first. I sat down in a chair, my hands still trembling as I held the phone. Ethan's voice was quieter now, almost distant. Mom, stay where you are, he said. I'm trying to report this to the airline control. Do they believe you? I asked softly. There was a pause. No, he admitted. That answer hurt more than I expected. Because if even the people trained for emergencies couldn't believe him, then what hope did we have? One of the officers in the room asked me to explain everything again. I tried. I really did. But halfway through, I stopped because I realized how impossible it all sounded when spoken out loud. A woman appearing in a house, on a plane, in mirrors, in reflections, moving without moving, being seen in different places at the same time, it sounded like madness, and I hated how much I needed it to be real. Suddenly, Ethan's voice came through again, but this time it was different, faster, sharper. Mom, he said urgently, something is happening in the cockpit. I sat up straight. What is it? Asked quickly. The reflection, he said, it's gone. I froze. Gone, I repeated. Yes, he said, every reflective surface in the cockpit just went completely black. A chill spread through me. What does that mean? I asked. There was silence. Then Ethan spoke again, and his voice was barely audible. I think she stopped appearing in reflections, he said. My chest tightened. Why? I whispered. Another pause, longer. He answered slowly. Because I think, he said, she's decided where to appear next. And at that exact moment, every light in the police station flickered once. Just once. But in that single flicker, I saw her again, standing at the far end of the room, not in a reflection, not in glass, but directly in front of me. And this time, she wasn't smiling. The moment the light steadied again, she was gone. But the image of her standing there had already burned itself into my mind so deeply that I couldn't trust what I was seeing anymore. My breath came in short, uneven pulls as I stared at the empty far end of the room, my eyes refusing to move even when the officers noticed my reaction. Ma'am, one of them asked quickly, stepping closer. What did you see this time? I couldn't answer immediately. My throat felt tight, like something was closing around my voice from the inside. Ethan's voice kept calling through the phone, but even he sounded distant now, as if the connection between us was weakening with every passing second. Mom, talk to me, he said urgently. What's happening there? I finally forced myself to speak. She was here, I whispered. In the room. The officer frowned, looking toward where I was pointing. There's no one there now, he said carefully. I know, I replied quickly, my voice shaking. But she was. A heavy silence filled the room after that. Not the normal kind of silence, but one that felt like it had weight, like it was pressing down on all of us at once. One of the officers exchanged a glance with the other, and I could see it clearly now, the doubt creeping in again. Not disbelief, but uncertainty. The kind that grows when reality stops behaving the way it should. Ethan's voice broke through again. "Mom, the cockpit lights just flickered too," he said. My heart dropped instantly. "Here too," I whispered. "The station lights just did the same thing." There was a pause on his end, a long one. "That means it's connected," he said slowly. I closed my eyes for a moment. "Everything is connected," I replied softly. My voice barely sounded like my own anymore. The officer closest to me stepped back slightly, reaching for his radio. "We may need backup in here," he said quietly. The second officer didn't argue. He was still scanning the room, his posture tense, as if expecting something to appear again at any second. I stayed seated, gripping the phone tightly, afraid that if I moved too quickly, something would follow the motion. "Ethan," I said softly, "what do we do?" There was another pause, but this time it felt different. He didn't answer right away. Instead, I heard background noise on his end, voices, alarms, movement increasing. The calm control he usually had was gone now. "Mom," he said finally, "I think she's not just appearing anymore." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" I asked, his voice lowered. "I think she's choosing when people see her," he said, "and when they don't." I felt a cold wave spread through my chest. "That doesn't make sense," I whispered, even though deep down I already knew nothing about this situation followed logic anymore. "I know," he said quickly, "but listen to me. Every time someone acknowledges her, she gets stronger." I froze. "Stronger how?" There was a brief silence, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. He sounded scared in a way I had never heard before. "It's like she's learning from us," he said. "From attention, from recognition, from fear." I looked around the room instinctively. The officers were still present, still watching, still trying to make sense of what I was saying. But now even their presence felt uncertain, like it might not be enough to hold reality together. "So what are you saying?" I asked quietly. "We ignore her." Ethan didn't respond immediately. "I don't know if we can," he admitted. That answer made my chest tighten even more. Suddenly, one of the officers spoke again. "Ma'am," he said, stepping closer, "can you describe exactly what you saw when the lights flickered?" I hesitated. My mind replayed it instantly, the shape, the stillness, the absence of movement. "She was standing there," I said slowly. "At the end of the room, not in a reflection this time, just there." The officer frowned slightly. "Did she say anything?" I shook my head. "No." "Did she move?" I paused. My voice dropped even lower. "No, but she felt closer than before." The officer looked uncomfortable now, but he didn't interrupt. Ethan's voice came through again, sharper. "Mom, listen carefully," he said. "Something just changed again." I straightened immediately. "What is it?" I asked. There was a sound of movement on his end, faster now, urgent. "The flight control just lost visual confirmation on our aircraft," he said, my breath caught. "What does that mean?" I asked quickly. "It means," he replied slowly, "we're still flying, but from the outside it's like we're not visible anymore." My grip on the phone tightened so hard my hand hurt. "That's not possible," I whispered again, but even as I said it, my voice sounded weaker than before. "Mom," Ethan said quietly, "the passengers are calm now." I blinked. "Calm," I repeated. "After everything." "Yes," he said, "too calm." A strange feeling crept into my chest. "What do you mean too calm?" There was a pause before he answered. "It's like they've stopped reacting," he said. "Like they're watching something we can't see." My stomach twisted. I looked at the officers again. One of them was still talking into his radio, but the other had gone completely still, staring at the wall as if listening to something I couldn't hear. "Ethan," I whispered, "I think something is happening here too." Before he could respond, the lights in the room dimmed again, but this time they didn't just flicker. They lowered slowly, as if someone had turned a dial down on reality itself. The officer on the radio stopped mid-sentence. The second officer turned toward me slowly, and in that dim light, I saw her again. Not at the end of the room this time, not in a reflection, but standing between me and the door, closer than before. And this time, she was looking directly at the phone in my hand. As if she could hear everything Ethan was saying. As if she had always been listening. For a moment, I couldn't move. My entire body locked in place as the dim light in the room seemed to bend around her presence. She wasn't walking. She wasn't appearing suddenly. She was just there, as if she had always been standing between me and the door, and I had only just now become aware of it. The officers noticed my expression immediately. The one with the radio lowered it slowly, his eyes narrowing as he followed my gaze. "Ma'am," he said carefully, his voice uncertain now. "What is it?" I couldn't answer. My throat felt completely closed, like even breathing was something I had to force. Ethan's voice continued through the phone, distant but urgent. Mom, talk to me. I swallowed hard, my lips trembling. She's here, I whispered. The officer stepped slightly forward, trying to follow what I was seeing. There's no one, he started, but stopped mid-sentence, because now he saw my face. And whatever he saw there made him stop doubting me. Slowly, the second officer turned as well, his hand instinctively moving toward his belt. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had shifted closer together. The woman didn't move, she just watched, not at me this time, not at the officers, but at the phone in my hand. Ethan, I whispered, my voice breaking, she's looking at you. There was silence on the line for half a second too long. Then Ethan spoke, his voice lower now. Mom, she's not supposed to be able to see me. I felt a cold rush through my body. What do you mean? I asked quickly. She's not physically on the plane right now, he said slowly, but I can feel her looking at me through the cockpit glass. My stomach twisted violently. The woman in front of me finally moved, just slightly. A small tilt of her head, like she was listening more closely now. The officer closest to me raised his voice. Step away from the door, he ordered firmly. But she didn't react to him. It was like he wasn't even part of the moment anymore. Everything in the room felt centered around her now. Ethan's breathing became uneven through the phone. Mom, something happening in the cockpit, he said. I tightened my grip. What is it? I asked urgently. There was a pause, then his voice cracked slightly. The reflection isn't gone anymore, he said. It's back. My chest tightened. What reflection? I asked. All of them, he replied. Every surface in the cockpit is reflecting something, but not the room. I felt my legs weaken slightly. Then what is it reflecting? I whispered. Another pause. And then Ethan said something that made my entire world collapse inward. It's reflecting your house, he said. My breath stopped completely. That's impossible, I whispered, shaking my head slightly. We're still flying, he continued, his voice rising with confusion and fear. But in every reflective surface, it's like we're inside your living room again. I looked up at her instantly. She was still standing there, still watching. But now her eyes, they looked different, not empty anymore. Focused. Like she was seeing two places at once. Mom, Ethan said suddenly, more urgently. She's stepping closer to the cockpit door again, but this time I don't think she's walking. I felt my heartbeat spike. What does that mean? I asked. It feels like, he hesitated, like the space is moving toward her instead of her moving through it. The woman in the room took another step forward. And the moment she did, the lights flickered again, but this time, instead of dimming or brightening, they showed something else entirely. For a split second, the entire room changed. The walls were gone, the officers were gone, the police station was gone, and I was standing inside my own living room again, exactly as it was before, the same couch, the same window, the same silence. I gasped sharply and stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. No, this isn't real, I whispered. The officers' voices cut through immediately. Ma'am, stay with us. And just like that, the room snapped back. The station returned. The walls reappeared. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. But she was still there, closer now. Did you see that? One of the officers asked, his voice shaken. I nodded quickly, unable to speak. Ethan's voice came through again, but now it sounded distorted, like the signal itself was breaking. Mom, he said slowly, I just saw you. My eyes widened. What? I whispered. In the reflection, he said. You were sitting in your living room. My breathing became uneven again. That's not possible, I said, though my voice barely held together. I'm here, he continued, but I saw you watching me from your house window. The woman in front of me smiled faintly again, not fully, just enough to be noticed. And that was when I realized something terrifying. She wasn't just appearing in reflections anymore. She wasn't just moving between places. She was aligning them. Folding them, like reality itself was starting to overlap. The officer closest to me suddenly stepped back. We need to evacuate this building, he said quickly. Now. The second officer nodded immediately, reaching for his radio again. But before he could speak into it, all the lights in the room went out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. Not a flicker, not a delay, just instant absence of light. And in that darkness, I still heard her voice. Soft, calm, right next to me. You're all looking at me now, she whispered. And in that same moment, Ethan screamed through the phone. Mom, she's inside the cockpit, she's here. And then the line went dead. The silence after the call dropped was heavier than anything I had ever experienced in my life. It wasn't just the absence of Ethan's voice. It felt like something had been severed inside me, like a thread that had been holding reality together suddenly snapped. I stood frozen in the darkness of the police station room, my hand still gripping the phone even though there was nothing on the other end anymore. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice breaking instantly. No answer, just static that faded into nothing. The officers reacted immediately, voices rising in confusion as they tried to restore power. Flashlights flickered on, cutting through the darkness in sharp, unstable beams. One of them grabbed my arm gently. "Stay with us, ma'am," he said urgently. But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was still stuck on those final words. She's inside the cockpit. The woman hadn't moved. I could feel it even without seeing her clearly. That presence was still there in front of me, close enough that my instincts screamed at me to run, but my body refused to obey. Slowly, the emergency lights in the room came back on, but instead of restoring normality, they made everything worse, because now I could see her more clearly than before. She was no longer standing at a distance. She was only a few feet away, and this time she wasn't smiling at all. Her expression was neutral, almost calm, like she had finished waiting. "Where's my son?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The room felt like it tilted slightly at my words. The officers exchanged a glance, but neither of them spoke immediately. "Ma'am," one of them began cautiously, but stopped, because something had changed in the air again. The lights flickered once more. And for a split second, I didn't see the police station at all. I saw the cockpit. Ethan was there, sitting frozen, his hands hovering near the controls, his eyes wide with fear as he looked at something I couldn't see. And behind him, I saw her again, standing directly behind his seat. My breath stopped completely. "Ethan!" I screamed instinctively, stepping forward. The moment I did, the vision snapped back. The station returned. The officers grabbed my arms, thinking I was about to collapse. "What did you see?" one of them asked urgently. My voice shook violently. "She's with him," I said. "She's on the plane, she's in the cockpit." The officer looked at me, confused and alarmed. "That's not possible," he said quickly, but even he didn't sound certain anymore, because now the lights weren't flickering randomly. They were syncing. Every time I blinked, something else overlapped for a fraction of a second, the station, the plane, my house, the cockpit, all bleeding into each other like broken reflections in shattered glass. And she was in all of them. "Mom!" A faint voice crackled back through the phone suddenly. I gasped so sharply I almost dropped it. "Ethan!" I cried. "Ethan, are you there?" His voice was weak, distorted, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "Mom, I don't know where I am anymore," he said. My knees nearly gave out. "What do you mean?" I asked desperately. There was a long pause, then he spoke again, slower this time. "The cockpit window, it's not showing the sky anymore," he said. My stomach tightened. "Then what is it showing?" I whispered. Another pause. When he answered, his voice sounded completely drained. "It's showing your house," he said. I felt the room around me disappear again for a moment. "No," I whispered. "That's not real." "Mom," he continued faintly, "she's sitting in your living room now." My breath caught. "No," I said louder this time, shaking my head. "I'm here, I'm in the station." "I know," he replied, "but I can see both at the same time." The officers were speaking again, but I couldn't hear them clearly anymore. The world felt like it was splitting into layers, each one visible, each one real, each one collapsing into the other. "Ethan, listen to me," I said quickly. "Focus on my voice. You're on a plane, you're safe, you're flying." There was silence. Then he said something that made my entire body go cold. "Mom," he whispered, "I think we're not in separate places anymore." I shook my head violently. No, that's not possible." "She's not moving between us anymore," he continued. "She's making us overlap." I looked up at the woman again. She had moved even closer now, so close that I could see her face clearly in the emergency lights. And this time she wasn't looking at me or the phone. She was looking past me, like she was seeing something behind reality itself. "What does she want?" I whispered, my voice breaking completely. The woman finally spoke again. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried through the room like it didn't belong to the space at all. "You've been separated for too long," she said. My blood ran cold. "No," I whispered. "We were always separate." She tilted her head slightly, like she was correcting a misunderstanding. "Not anymore," she said quietly, and then the officers shouted, "Ma'am, move!" But it was too late. The lights exploded into brightness for a single instant, and in that flash I saw everything at once. The police station, the cockpit, my living room, Ethan's terrified face, and her. Standing in the center of all of it, connecting every space like a bridge that should not exist. And then everything went white, completely, impossibly white. And the last thing I heard before silence took everything was Ethan's voice, faint but clear, calling one word. Mom! The white light did not fade the way normal light fades. It simply loosened its grip. Slowly, like fog pulling away from glass, shapes began to return. First came sound, distant, broken echoes of voices trying to find each other again. Then came weight, the feeling of my own body returning to me as if I had been gone somewhere and forced back. I gasped sharply, collapsing onto my knees without realizing I was even standing. My hands hit a hard surface, the cold floor of the police station, but something felt wrong. The texture wasn't consistent. It was like touching two places at once. Ma'am, stay down, a voice shouted nearby. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear my vision. The room was there, but not fully. The walls of the station flickered faintly like a weak signal on a broken screen, and behind it something else was still visible. A second layer, a different space bleeding through. Ethan's voice suddenly came through the phone again, weak but alive. Mom, I froze. Ethan, I cried instantly, lifting the phone closer. Ethan, I'm here. His breathing was heavy, strained. I can see you, he said, my heart twisted painfully. Where are you? I asked quickly. There was a pause. I don't know anymore, he admitted. I'm in the cockpit, but I can see the station too. I looked up, and for a brief second I saw it too, the cockpit overlaying the room, Ethan sitting in front of controls that didn't belong to this place, his eyes searching something invisible, and behind him, her presence still lingering like a shadow that refused to leave. She's still here, he whispered. My throat tightened. She's here too, I said, looking around the station. The officers were still present, but even they looked shaken now, their outlines flickering slightly as if they weren't fully anchored to one reality anymore. One of them spoke, his voice unstable. What is happening to the building? I couldn't answer him, because I didn't know anymore if it was the building changing or everything else. The woman stood in the center again, not walking, not appearing, just existing where all versions of reality overlapped. Calm, still, watching both me and Ethan at the same time. This isn't real, I whispered weakly, though I no longer knew what real meant. She looked at me gently, almost sadly. It is, she said softly. It's just together now. Ethan's voice cracked through the phone again. Mom, I think she opened something. My hands tightened. Opened what? I asked urgently. He hesitated. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter than before. A connection, he said, between everywhere I was seeing her. The air around me felt heavier. The flickering intensified. The station, the cockpit, my house, they all overlapped more clearly now, no longer separate images but layers stacked imperfectly on top of each other. And in the center of all layers she stood. Why? I whispered, my voice breaking. Why us? The woman tilted her head slightly as if considering the question. Because you kept looking, she said simply. My chest tightened. We didn't choose this, I said desperately. We were afraid. She nodded slowly, almost understanding. Fear is attention, she replied. Ethan suddenly spoke again, urgency returning. Mom, she's stepping closer to the cockpit controls, he said. My stomach dropped. Stop her, I said immediately. I can't, he replied. It's like she's not walking on the plane, she's just arriving where I expect her to be. I looked at her again in the station. She hadn't moved, but the distance between us felt different now, smaller, wrong. The officers were backing away slowly, one of them whispering into his radio, but the response never came. The system was breaking down, line by line. Mom, Ethan said suddenly, softer now. I think I understand something. What? I asked quickly. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was almost calm. She isn't traveling between places, he said. She's removing the distance between them. My breath caught. I looked around the station again, and for a terrifying second, I realized he was right. There was no separation anymore. Not between rooms, not between screens, not between reflections. Everything was folding inward, collapsing toward a single shared point. And that point was her. The woman stepped forward once more, and this time no one stopped her. Not because they couldn't, but because stopping didn't seem to mean anything anymore. She stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could see every detail of her expression. And for the first time, her voice wasn't soft, it was final. Now, she said gently, you can see each other properly. My breath shook. No, I whispered, please. Ethan's voice came one last time through the phone, clearer than before. Mom, he said softly, I can see you. Tears filled my eyes instantly. Ethan, I'm here, I said. I'm right here. And then everything, every layer, every reflection, every space collapsed into a single moment where I could finally see him too. Not in a phone, not in a reflection, not in a memory, just him, looking back at me, and between us she was no longer separate. She was everywhere we had ever been apart, and everything went still.